All right, hello everybody. We are back on reddit.com to continue our journey through all of the echo chambers on the internet. And so far, it's been going pretty good. Reddit hasn't let us down. There's been some fantastic, entertaining content, some insightful and educational viewpoints from various commenters throughout the subreddits we've looked at. And obviously, it's provided great substance for actual critical commentary or critical analysis, which is kind of the point of the video. Not to go around and insult these online anonymous strangers and to just put their opinions on blast for the fun of it, and to demean them and misrepresent what they're saying. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not the point here. The point is that it can be useful sometimes to go around and to get a little taste of all of these various spaces on the internet, specifically these spaces that over time, because they have no dissenting voice within them, because they have no person or people who tend to keep the conversation balanced or centered around a social equilibrium, you see things happen such as like more and more extreme views and beliefs and opinions start to arise within these communities. And that's to be expected when you have a large and increasing number of people that are centered around a topic or an idea, usually with a positive affinity towards that topic. And as the community grows and more like minded people funnel in, uh, there's going to be a natural, it's not properly going to reflect a group of opinions from an average population. And so these people start to think a certain way. And these people tend to, as they're oriented around this idea, they pursue it more and more, basically to the extreme. And these things are much easier to happen than one might think when there is no guardrails for the conversation. And these guardrails are not in the form of mods who supposedly keep these communities in check and keep them safe and relevant. No, no, no. The mods are, it's basically the bureaucratic equivalent of, Reddit. It's the swamp, really, because these people, at the end of the day, they're the ones who have complete and utter control over each conversation. They can drive and conform the shape of the subreddit around the type of narrative that they want. And all it takes is them to delete the posts that don't align with this pursuit and to remove the users that question the overarching vision. And there is no accountability and there's no transparency. There's nothing that can be done to stop, perhaps an anonymous mod in his power grab, in his efforts to power grab. So they're not super vocal, but they're the ones that have the most influence on the content of the site. But not to already waste that much of your guys' time, let's jump right into this page here. And I thought I would start by going over this right side here, which is it appears to be their About Us section. And we might be able to learn a little bit about their philosophy and what exactly they're trying to do with this page. But all right, well, like right at the top, a victory for one is a victory for all. Join WorkReform, fight for a good quality of life for everyone who sells their labor. I mean, can't really disagree with that, although selling their labor is the type of language that indicates maybe maybe a little indicative of a certain economic philosopher that we all know and love. Okay, and then we can look at their political objectives. So right at the top, in bolded letters, mandatory prison time for union busting and other labor law violations, including wage theft. Raise the national minimum wage to at least $25 per hour. Enact universal family and medical leave, aka Medicare for all. All right. Improve and actually enforce antitrust laws. Pass tuition-free college and trade schools. Pass the PRO Act. So we can look at the PRO Act. We know what Medicare for all is, but just based on this first section here. So they've made some Well, they've outlined some tangible objectives, and these aren't things that we haven't heard before, even from current government officials, politicians, pundits, stuff like that are pushing for this type of thing. But I think it's important, and we'll see, we'll figure this out as we continue to look through here. But for almost every single one of these points here, like top one, for example, wage theft. See, that's an interesting term, because it can mean a broad range of things. And if it means specifically, in the legal sense, an employer illegally and untransparently taking money out of your paycheck without your knowledge, then that's textbook definition of wage theft. That's obviously a bad thing. But what you see in these spaces, and kind of how we just, like the phenomenon we just outlined, that definition extends out not to explicitly refer to the like that situation, but it's applied to things like an employee doesn't get paid for something they maybe think they should get paid for or reimbursed for, and it's much more gray than like an actual unlawful stealing of your employee's money. So they'll use these more ambiguous examples and call it wage theft. And my only question would be, what exactly do they mean when they say that? The next one, raise the national minimum wage to at least 25 per hour. All right, we've heard that one before. That one isn't necessarily new. 25 might be a little bit higher than the standard, 20, even 15 for some states. But the key for this one here is, this is your one of your main political objectives. I would hope that if this is something you are orienting your activism around, that there would be some math behind this, that there would be some kind of economic analysis, a series of calculations made to determine how that 25 per hour increase would affect the supply demand graph. Because, well, if you want to propose a legislation like that, then that's fine, because maybe it'll work and maybe it'll have benefits. But I feel like the burden of due diligence is on you to show how the economic math would support something like that. It doesn't have to be a dollar for dollar calculation, but in principle, we need to understand how passing a law like that isn't going to absolutely shaft the lower end, the smaller business side of the labor supply arc. And that's something that you've seen happen even with $16 minimum wages in California. So it's like these, you're proposing this, you have to ensure that a solution is in place to deal with the unintended consequences. And that's for every single one of these points. Yeah, including enact universal family and medical leave, or Medicare for all. Like if you want to propose something like that, then you also have to explain what's going to happen to privatized healthcare, and what's going to happen to the quality of healthcare, and what our guardrails are going to be if the quality and decreases to a significant degree, despite the overall price increasing to a significant degree. If that happens, what are we going to do? Are we going to take a look at the system, or are we just double tripling down because we're bought into the philosophy, the work reform philosophy? So these could be good questions, but they need more rigid answers. And maybe I'm speaking ahead of myself. Maybe they have outlined these answers in more detail. We'll look at that. But just to get through this, improve and actually enforce antitrust laws. Improve, I wonder what their scope of improvement would look like. Pass tuition-free college and trade schools. That's a whole nother conversation. We could go down many rabbit holes, but just in the same, with the same sort of critique as the previous points here, how do we know that's going to actually be a benefit for anyone that is involved with that? I mean, let's think about the people that could potentially get screwed over if you did something like make all college tuition free. Well, first of all, obviously, the people who paid for college at any point in their life, they're getting screwed over in a way. That at least they would definitely feel like they're getting screwed over. That's for sure. The individuals who have worked hard for high level, difficult, prestigious degrees will automatically see a devaluing of their degree with a significantly higher number of people being able to get the same degree despite requiring a lower bar for attaining that. Because as more and more people funnel into the academia, the bar necessarily gets lowered. Because dirty truth behind subsidized higher education is that at the end of the day, these institutions are willing to take more money if they are lowering perhaps the average IQ over time. And that is a generalization. And that maybe sounds like a pretentious thing to say. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know how much I hate IQ as any sort of categorization or measurement. But just for the sake of that argument, for the sake of this idea, this is that there are multiple levels of devaluation. The degrees, they're all going to be worth less. The jobs are going to be more competitive because there's going to be a higher pool of overqualified applicants for jobs that don't need that many applicants. Like, we have no idea, especially the more common degrees, they would be, I mean, you could already make the case that they're worthless, but it would become a pointless credentialism scheme. Because what is the point of higher education? It's to prepare you for, I mean, there are multiple arguments to be had, but prepare you for a specific career field, to prepare you for independent adult life, and to open you to experience in general. I think you could make a good argument for those three things for sure. But in terms of the experience you need to get good at what you want to do for your career and for your life, college that's not going to get you there. So I think we're already starting to ask these questions, like what is the real value of college right now? What would happen to the credential system if there was a massive influx of less qualified people in these institutions? And then what would the downstream effects of that be, like in our hospitals and for the people who build our bridges and fly commercial planes and perform heart surgery? It's like this lowering of the bar, this trade-off will have consequences. All right, let's look at their philosophies now. All workers must be paid a living wage for their labor, and that's going to carry however much weight, because what is the living wage going to be? Is it going to be 25 per hour? So that's essentially just a reiteration of your political objective. Income inequality is the main cause of lower living standards. And when I read a sentence like that, it's really is jarring to me, because but that's a backwards way of looking at it, in my opinion, because lower living standards are the default, right? Like, you want to talk about inequality, like everything is relative, first of all. So if you're typing about your inequality from a computer on the WorkReform subreddit, you're probably relatively on the higher end of that inequality scale, the higher end of that wealth inequality scale, than probably the vast majority of the world population. That's an assumption, but like, just keep that in mind too. But wouldn't you think lower living standards are kind of the default? Like, what percentage of the world was born into a high living standard? I don't know the answer to that, but it's probably really, really, really low. And so what has allowed us to get to a point in time where we're not only, it's like assumed and taken for granted that we're born into a high living standard? Well, that can only happen when you are so far detached from the advantage you are getting and benefiting from society relative to the entitlement you feel you should be getting, for whatever reason, but it's usually ignorance. Because I think you have to kind of start from scratch and figure out, okay, We start from low living standards. That's a default. Like, as humans, we're born into nothing, and we have built up everything we have as a result of the opportunities and before us at any given point along that timeline. And we'll continue to do so. And we'll continue to provide more opportunities to find more opportunities and to raise our living standard. But then the question becomes, how is that done? And well, okay, that's done by most likely providing as much opportunity to as many people as possible, and then creating an incentive structure where everyone's individual desire to become successful themselves results in a marginal rising redistribution just by necessity of trade. That's because trade increases value. That's economics. I'm not making that up. Trade increases overall value because of specialization. But if we're trying to create a system that maximizes opportunities for all people in a way that incentivizes them to innovate, create, stay motivated, and work hard, and encourage others to do the same, what would that system look like? I think that's the important question to ask. And I think there's a good conversation to be had about what would actually incentivize people to be maximally productive. But is it going to be a draconian central control of wealth? Is that really what you think it's going to be? Like, because people see that, they lose agency. Their their vision for their ability to become an entrepreneur, to innovate, to create something, to become filthy rich, even if it's out of their own self-interest, that it dissipates. It's no longer there, and then maybe someone who otherwise would have created, invented, innovated the cure for a currently uncurable disease, maybe they would now be sitting on their couch getting government money because all of wealth and income was centrally controlled and distributed. That's a very specific example, but it's something I'd probably see happening. With the government saying, we're going to decide what happens to all material resources, and you will be happy little workers for the state. All right, we're talking too much. Workers must join together and fight back for what is rightfully theirs. The assumptions in that statement are incredible. I mean, well, okay, what's rightfully theirs is the product of their labor. Okay, I might even agree with you, but okay, what else is rightfully theirs? Like, seriously, what else is rightfully theirs? Not the capital produced by others, not the capital owned by the state. So the only thing that's rightfully theirs is the labor that they produce, right? I believe that's the core of this philosophy. But let's actually think about that. Because what labor do you produce? Like, if you might have a job where you're providing a high amount of value to a high number of people. Are you utilizing any tools in order to allow you to operate that way? Say a smartphone, say a car, say reading glasses, say running water. Were you involved or instrumental in any one of those innovations that you utilize on a daily basis? You weren't. You weren't there, and you couldn't figure most of that stuff out if you spent the rest of your life trying to do it. And that's the unspoken but very, very important reality that goes over the heads of some of these work reformers. Because in order to produce the labor value that you romanticize so much, and you want to cling to so much, and you want to retain control over so much, oh, I work for it, so I should have a stake in the result of my labor. That's fine. But then apply that standard through your whole life. Okay. Are you utilizing anything that isn't a result of your own labor? Are you utilizing more than you're producing? And if so, what are you going to do about that? You got to ask that question. We must not be divided and conquered. Workers gain the most when they focus on unifying issues. Okay, and now their goals just looks like a reiteration. They've said higher wages for underpaid workers. That's like the third time they've said that because they think everyone is underpaid. Better worker representation, including but not limited to unions. They love unions, but they probably want mandatory worker representation in government. Better and fewer working hours. So what they mean by better and fewer, they want to work less and they want to work more so when they prefer to. They want to choose their hours and they want to work less hours because they deserve it. Stimulating a massive wave of worker organizing in the United States and beyond. Stimulating a massive wave of worker organizing in the United States and beyond. Okay, I don't think that's grammatically correct, so I think we can skip it. Organizing and supporting political causes and campaigns that put workers first. So yeah, just establishing themselves, entrenching themselves in the bureaucracy, lobbying, etc. So it took way longer. I feel like they could have really consolidated that and made it more concise. But we got a good idea. And after reading those points, I'm a little less optimistic about this being a place where there's going to be critical discussion occurring. And what still is bugging me a little bit is that a lot of these things they say with conviction, but there's no elaboration. All right, I cut the video for a couple minutes because I just wanted to check really quickly to see if I could find any pin posts or linked posts that outlined in more detail some of their goals and philosophies. But they really don't have anything other than um, basically what consists of the rest of the subreddit, which is memes and anecdotes. So I guess what I was hoping for at the beginning of the video, which was that this would be potentially a place to have a well-intentioned, intellectually honest discussion around the ideas of work reform, for which there are definitely really good arguments to make that could benefit employees and potentially also benefit employers in a way that doesn't severely disrupt the workforce. But that doesn't really seem to be of interest to at least the people who spend time around here, because it much more so seems to be similar to what we saw with anti-work. Subreddit almost feels like it just reflects this sentiment against the idea of work or work ethic in general, or an entitlement mindset toward kind of leisure in a first world country. And I think we will make a part two about this, and we'll go into maybe some posts and some ideas in more detail. But just from reading their their description and their self summary alone, I think we were able to kind of take away a decent amount of information um, about what this subreddit really is, what it represents, and also how it fits into the pattern of what we've been seeing in our previous videos. So I don't think there's too much else here for this video, but we brought up some interesting points, and I think we're going to dive into those a little bit deeper. But yeah, it's a slightly disappointing page, but I think that might just be me being foolish, because I should be smart enough to know at this point what these subreddits consist of. So